Welcome to This Explainer. The United States government recently dropped a massive headline, announcing it's mobilizing more than $5 billion to use artificial intelligence for scientific discovery. It's a huge number, right? But the real story requires us to look past that bold figure. In This Explainer, we're neutrally and analytically deconstructing the claims surrounding this highly publicized AI for Science initiative, known as the Genesis Mission Expansion. We'll be separating the official administrative claims from the verified facts to figure out what resources are genuinely additive for scientific discovery and what technical and legal conditions still need to be met before this initiative can actually produce verifiable breakthroughs. So let's dive into our central question. When a $5 billion federal expansion is announced, it sounds like an immediate, massive injection of brand new capital. But how much genuinely new research capacity does that actually buy? To figure that out, we have to look closely at how that headline funding total is built. We need to distinguish between what's already happening, what's merely planned for the future, and what's actually fully funded and operational today. To answer this, we're going to quickly walk through 6 key areas: the initial $5 billion claim, a deconstruction of the funding ledger, the intended AI infrastructure, project selections versus actual awards, competing visions and risks, and finally, what must happen next. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the $5 billion claim. Now, you might assume this expansion just started, but it actually builds upon earlier foundations. As you can see, the Genesis mission originally launched back in November 2025 via an executive order. From there, we saw a Department of Energy funding opportunity in March 2026 and a $1 billion bilateral partnership with Japan in June. So the July 2026 announcement is really aggregating these separate, older policy rollouts and agency pledges into a single unified public framework involving over 15 federal agencies. Moving right along to Section 2, deconstructing the funding ledger. Okay, this is absolutely crucial. The announced $5 billion is not a single new statutory appropriation passed by Congress. Instead, it's what we call an aggregate commitment. That means it combines resources that have vastly different legal and fiscal statuses. Some of this money is already obligated. Some of it is merely planned for future years. And interestingly, some of it isn't even cash at all. When we actually break down these numbers, there isn't a single straightforward public receipt. For instance, the Department of War is planning more than $1.5 billion, but a massive chunk of that relies on future fiscal year 27 congressional approvals, which haven't happened yet. The NIH aligns $1.2 billion in obligated and planned funds, and then you have private partners pledging over $800 million. But wait, that total includes in-kind, non-cash credits, things like cloud compute time and access to AI models, without an exact cash breakdown provided. Because of this, the exact share of this $5 billion that represents newly additive research capacity isn't publicly determinable just from the announcement alone. That brings us to Section 3, the intended AI infrastructure. There's a vital distinction to make here between the mandated architecture of the American Science and Security Platform, or ASSP, and its current reality. The vision is honestly incredible: a shared AI-native infrastructure seamlessly connecting federal supercomputers, models, and datasets. But as of the July 2026 expansion, the platform is actively in the development and demonstration phase by the DOE. It's an intended architecture, not a fully operational capability deployed at a national scale just yet. And to make this platform actually work, federal agencies have to solve some serious data governance puzzles. We're talking about integrating classified national security data from the Department of War alongside highly sensitive, HIPAA-protected clinical data for the NIH's biogenesis component. Breaking down these entrenched interagency silos securely is a monumental technical and legal hurdle. Now for Section 4, project selections versus awards. Out of a massive pool of over 5,000 applications, the Department of Energy selected exactly 278 projects to advance these strategic AI for science goals. That kind of high demand really shows just how eager the scientific community is to get their hands on these tools. You'll see a pretty broad mix of institutions leading the charge here. Universities are leading 168 projects, and national labs are heading up 87. Across all the lead and sub-awards, 342 organizations are participating. But again, it's vital to understand the precise administrative status of these selections. Because here's the catch. As this pipeline shows, these 278 projects are currently stuck at step 3, the negotiation stage. They represent proposed funding ceilings and selections for negotiation. They are not finalized, legally binding research grants. The Department of Energy retains the right to cancel negotiations entirely, meaning these are not yet active research awards. Section 5. Competing visions and real risks. These competing visions highlight a really fascinating tension. Proponents view this whole initiative as a transformative infrastructure that's going to fundamentally accelerate complex discovery. Critics and independent analysts, however, look at that funding ledger we just discussed and suggest it might largely be an administrative consolidation, essentially a branding framework grouping existing and planned resources under one umbrella. There's also a genuine risk noted by analysts regarding vendor lock-in. Basically, heavy reliance on commercial tech partners could make federal research structurally dependent on just a few private companies. The ambitions are undeniably vast. For example, the NIH director aims to vastly accelerate medical translation, stating the goal is to cut discovery time in half within 10 years. However, independent analysis confirms that no published baseline or validated methodology actually exists in primary agency documents right now to measure this specific halving goal. Because of all this unresolved uncertainty, we have to look at a few highly conditional scenarios. Scenario A sees effective implementation with rapid, reproducible discoveries. Scenario B sees partial success, maybe working well in computational physics but stalling in biomedicine because of privacy bottlenecks. Scenario C is where future funding fails to materialize, leaving the mission as mostly administrative branding. And Scenario D represents a failure due to data breaches or litigation surrounding adjacent proposed changes to federal grant rules. Remember, these aren't deterministic predictions. They're conditional scenarios that depend heavily on how institutions actually execute this. Finally, Section 6, what must happen next? The true significance of this multi-billion-dollar announcement hinges entirely on clearing a few massive hurdles. Moving forward, it's critical to monitor how many of those 278 DOE selections actually transition into finalized awards, and whether Congress actually appropriates the planned fiscal year 27 funding for the Department of War. On top of that, the deployment of secure data standards and the finalization of adjacent OMB grant rules, which currently have the academic community pretty much on edge, are absolutely essential watch points. Ultimately, AI-generated hypotheses only matter if they can be validated in laboratories and clinical settings. The Genesis mission is a substantial federal effort, for sure, but its success isn't guaranteed just by a press release. Will the finalized awards, the clear data governance, and the actual congressional appropriations materialize to match that $5 billion claim? Thank you for joining us for this explainer. Keep a close eye on those finalized awards to see if this initiative generates genuinely new research capacity or just a newly organized ledger.